Welcome everyone to Future Strong episode 9, the show when we discuss everything to do with emerging talent. My name's Nikki Garchea. I'm the co-founder and chief customer officer at Capfinity. Capfinity is a business focused on the assessment of strengths in recruitment, development and transformation. And we are very excited today because we have our first ever returning guests to Future Strong. So we're delighted to speak to Bob and Manny. But before I let them introduce themselves, my wonderful co-host, Lindsay Pollock.
Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pollock. I'm a career and workplace expert, author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. So excited to have these 2 gentlemen with us today as our returning guests, as our friends, as such leaders in the space of early career success, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I will let them introduce themselves because Nikki and I would just gush like the entire 30 minutes. So we'll let you do it more concisely. Bob, why don't we start with you?
We might gush a little throughout. So
I mean, we'll try not to be too overwhelming. Bob.
You're too kind. Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Nikki, and thanks for having me back. And I'm sure Manny feels the same way. It's a privilege being back. So I'm Bob Athwal, and today I'm really going to talk to you about my hat on as one of the co-founders and trustees of the 1 Hour Project. For my day job, most people will know that I've worked in early careers and in higher education, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is pretty much my day job. So there you go.
And Manny.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Nikki and Lindsay, for hosting us again. Like Bob, I'm delighted to be a return guest to the program. I, too, like Bob, have a day job. At the moment, I serve as Senior Associate Vice President for Employer Engagement and Career Design at Northeastern University in Boston. However, that's just for a few weeks longer. Starting July 1st, I've accepted a role in leading career services at Harvard. So while those are my day jobs, I think Bob and I do spend a good part of our day on the 1 Hour Project. And I'm just very privileged and thrilled to chair the 1 Hour Project and work with Bob and the founders and the team of people who are really helping make this initiative a reality.
Great. Thank you both. And congratulations, Manny. I'm glad there'll be the rivalry between yourself and Lindsay as a Yale alum. Bob and I have just discovered about the major soccer game. So we're looking forward to...
Nikki, football.
Oh, football. Sorry. I mean, I'm learning. We're all developing over time. I currently go to speak to my colleagues in the UK, and I'm desperately trying to use the word CV, and I'm going res CV. So it's hard for me. It's very hard for me.
You got this,
Bob. It's wonderful to have you back. I obviously, as someone in my family, as the first person to go to university, feel very strongly about what the 1 Hour Project stands for. But would you just share with everybody kind of how you've come to set it up, what it's all about? And I think Lizzie in the back of the studio is going to put some things up so people can see the website and hear about it.
Yeah, thank you. The 1 Hour Project it's something really close to me, and I say close to me, and it's probably, you hear this from people often, who are close to my heart. But if I just start by telling you a little bit of a story, I mean, I'm the child of immigrants that came to the UK in the 50s to rebuild the country after the Second World War. My parents are both working class. In fact, my mum's illiterate, and there was no school in her village. And actually, the story of myself and many others that came, in all parts of the world to rebuild economies after the major war. I think I guess what you'll see is that we've all kind of integrated, but actually we didn't have access to networks, or we didn't have an understanding. And around the world, this has kind of manifested itself in terms of people using different words, but, lack of social or cultural capital, or just an understanding of how things work. And I found myself throughout my career of getting to school and then college and further higher education, universities, as we call them in the UK, I just found I was always chasing my tail a little bit, always felt like I didn't fit in, always felt like I didn't belong, didn't recognize perhaps how much was going on in my mind around my intellectual capacity or not. I just felt I didn't know, because I couldn't do some of the things my colleagues were doing or my peers were doing. And that stayed with me through after graduation to my first job and everything else. And I have to say, probably until I became in my early 40s, I suddenly realized actually there was a lot more going on. But when I look back now, what was happening unconsciously was that there were people looking out for me, giving me my first break, coaching me, mentoring me, recognizing I had some talent. I then kind of started to sort of forge a career in recruiting, and I was really lucky to work with an amazing organisation. And most people know that, I learnt my trade at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and one of the things I love about them is they recruit from everywhere. They take potential in terms of talent, and they really do train them well, and here I am. But of course I went on to work in other organisations, and with that sort of foundation really started to sort of accelerate my knowledge and my insights. And so every organisation I went to work for, and I worked for one of the biggest utilities in Europe, I started to remove barriers to entry, so people like me could actually get onto the graduate programs, because I started to recognise more and more that those people who had high GPA scores or came out of university with great degrees, actually there was no correlation in performance, not always. And actually what was happening was we were missing this talent. And so I started to become more and more interested in, and I have to say, apologies if anyone is here from McKinsey & Company, but actually you've got me thinking. But, McKinsey & Company got it wrong. The war for talent was no war for talent. It was the war for very narrow talent. And part of the reason we've all been in this competitive environment is because we've been looking for the same people in the same pools. And so this really then engaged my interest even more. And I went to work on the university side, and I went to work for a university that wasn't traditionally targeted by leading employers. And the students were fantastic. And so I went there to kind of use it as a proof of concept that if we did the right preparation, if we put the students in front of the right people, they would get hired. And I'm pleased to say that's what happened. But whilst at Leicester, I embarked upon a practice-based PhD. The practice-based PhD was, these are all my learnings and lessons. This is my story and many other stories. How do we solve this problem? And so the 1 hour project is a summarization of my PhD. I've got 3 papers to write, so if my supervisors are watching this, I'm doing them. But once I've submitted those, the idea is about why the 1 hour project was needed. And the 1 hour project is really to help people like me and others with similar stories, with similar lived experiences, really have access to people like us who understand how this labour market works around the world, but also use this platform to educate our peer organisations of what they could be doing to ensure social and racial equity of hiring. So that's how it started, and that's where it came from.
It's such an incredible origin story, Bob. And I just want to chime in before Lindsay gets Manny involved in the debate. But what you say about McKinsey and the discussion around the war for talent is something that I massively believe in, that there isn't the war that there needs to be. And I think at this time, when in both the US and UK, most of the news for the last kind of few months has been around this skills shortage and the lack of talent for certain roles, this tsunami around attrition, I do think now is our time to look at talent differently. If ever there were a door to push on broadening, it does feel like it's now.
Yeah, and also picking up, Bob, on what you said so beautifully about the post-war period in the 50s. I mean, we are post-war, right? The pandemic was a global shock, and that there's another opportunity to rethink things. And thank you just for sharing your personal story. Manny, of course, we want to bring you in. And I always obsessively watch the chat and want to let everyone know that Trudy Steinfeld is watching with our friend Kathy Sims. So they're out there watching this. 2 wonderful leaders and beautiful people are out there, which means we got the streaming right, Nikki. So people are able to watch. So that's good news. Manny, you're the chair of the project, and I know it's something that you're really passionate about. Can you talk about your involvement and what you hope the program will achieve?
Yeah, I think that, having known Bob and the other founders for a long time and being both friends and colleagues, I was drawn to their work. Also, as a first-generation college student myself, I could resonate with all the kinds of challenges. And it became clear to me anyway, as I learned more about the project and Bob and the rest of the team invited me in, that there was a role that I could play in supporting this, in working together to help in advocating on behalf of these efforts. And as chair, what I am doing is working very closely with the founders to help envision how we roll this forward, how we grow it beyond the kind of pilot effort that I have to say has been successfully launched in the UK as a result of our efforts. Because our hope is not to just think about this from a kind of UK perspective, but to expand the project into the US, into Canada, into Ireland, into South Africa, and into other parts of the world. Because as Bob said, the challenges of access to higher education, of success in as a result of higher education, of social mobility and equity are global challenges. Of course, they vary from country to country and region to region, but it was clear to us that our passion was around helping individuals, as we saw it at the end of the day, is what is the impact we can have through our efforts on an individual in terms of providing them the ability to get affirmation, to grow in confidence about their abilities, to connect them, and to hopefully help contribute to a success that might not otherwise be possible for them, or where the environment was so heavily stacked against them. So, you know, we talk almost daily about the 1 Hour Project, and the enthusiasm and the energy is there. And I think what we found is not only among our group, but also among the students and learners and industry matter experts that have become engaged with us so far through our pilot effort in the UK.
Just briefly, Manny, can you define what 1 Hour Project means and what the actual deliverable of the organization does?
Sure. So at the very basic level, what we are doing is creating an opportunity for an individual learner to spend an hour with an industry subject matter expert. At the heart of it, all our process steps are involved in creating that dialogue. And our goal, of course, is to encourage students to think about early on about the options that are out there, to go through a process which is based on Bob's research, and this has been really critical to our efforts. One is this notion of, you know, I'm a young person, I don't know what I have to offer, I don't know what I'm interested in. So a vital aspect of this process is what we call the vouch. In other words, we create an opportunity for students to identify their strengths. And there's some interesting things in the horizon as we work with the amazing work that Confinity has done in this space, but building around their strengths and interests, to have this process whereby someone can vouch for them. Someone who says, yes, Lindsay has this strength, or I've seen Nikki demonstrate this. This vouching is incredibly important because it's affirming for the young person who's embarking on this process. So what we do is we look at the students' interests and their strengths and this vouch process. And what we do is we match them with an industry or subject matter expert who spends this hour with them talking about their interests, talking about the opportunities that exist in a particular industry, in a particular organization, or more broadly about what the various pathways are. And what we have absolutely learned through this initial pilot phase is that young people really resonate with this. It opens up their eyes to opportunities. It affirms for them through the vouch process that they have something to offer, and it begins to broaden their horizons. And, you know, our goal at the end of the day, and we've been just so overwhelmed with the interest, you know, we ask our folks in the corporate sector, in the not-for-profit world, anyone who has an area of expertise to volunteer an hour of their time. And many people volunteer multiple hours with the goal of reaching multiple learners. So we've just been overwhelmed with the level of interest on the part of subject matter experts and the impact that they have had so far with these individuals. So at the end of the day, if we can continue to do that and continue to scale it and grow it globally, we're absolutely positive we're going to make a huge difference in the lives of many young people.
Incredible, Manny. And I think we've got somebody who was actually working with a future leader yesterday in the chat window. Is it, I may say the name wrong, but is it a Manny Lowy? Bob, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's a big shout out.
Yeah, I've just seen that on the chat. I mean, there's the vouching process in work. I mean, to Manny's point, my research says that you've got to have somebody to stand up for you, vouch for you, but also unconsciously, you know, how often have we heard from students around the world, I've only ever worked in Walmart, or I've only ever delivered papers or cut my neighbour's grass, but actually someone's seen you in action, turn up consistently and regularly and do work to a high standard. So they dismiss those experiences. And as Manny said, you know, getting students to think about, you know, their strengths, which is why, obviously, again, the work we all support as Capfinity, and we'll come on to that, was great and so aligned. But then recognising that they've got strengths is really, really important, because one of the challenges around the world, and I know you've got another question around this for me, is that too often we look at we look at a deficit-based model. You either have something, and if you don't have it, then you're in deficit of it. And that totally dismisses, well, you might have assets in other areas. And so I think that was the whole point behind it. And of course, the final piece is like Amani. If we can connect them to industry experts who can talk about their own career, their own journeys, and help students demystify these things who don't have that access, then brilliant, we're off.
It's incredible work, and I think we're all remembering people who supported us as we're going through this call. You know, picturing those sort of unacknowledged, unspoken mentors, and I'm so grateful that through the 1 Hour project that there's a formal process for people who might not have had that opportunity. Bob, you and I often talk about the kind of intersectionality that can happen with. Sometimes we may be more au fait with discussing issues around race or disability, but when it comes to actually socioeconomic status, I think our research, your research, is actually that is often the starting point, and then there might be racial disadvantage, there may be disability on top of that. Love you just to speak to really what are you trying to do with the 1 Hour project to lift a lid on some of those things and make industry understand some of the disadvantages that people face.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. So the first thing about the 1 Hour project, if you're from a lower socioeconomic background, if you're first in your family, you know, if you're part of that, there's slightly different criteria around the world, but let's just say you're first in your family to attend higher education, the 1 Hour project is designed for you. That means my kids, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to access it because both myself and their mum went to university. So the idea is it's about leveling the playing field. Now, that doesn't mean my kids don't have the same opportunities or shouldn't not have the same opportunities. It's not their fault they've had a bit of a privilege than I had, but actually they're going to be okay because we've helped them. They've got us to coach them and nurture them. But if you don't have that set up, the 1 Hour project is for you. And that is where the socioeconomic status is so important. And the reason the socioeconomic status is so important, because in the world of DEI and equity, it's about equality is important, but actually is the equity accessible? Is that equal? And that's what we're really trying to talk about. And actually in different parts of the world where we may not have as much diversity of racial backgrounds, actually the issue still is those that have and those that don't. And so when you look at lower socioeconomic sort of statuses, you recognize around the world that there's lots of students from all cultures, all backgrounds, all genders, all identities, all able or disabled abilities who are missing out. And so that's really our opportunity here, is that actually in the intersectionality piece, if I take the UK as an example, if you're a black male, you are and you're first in your family, you are more likely to be underemployed and not have opportunities in leading organizations that we would all recognize as household names. In fact, there was a report that the EY Foundation put out yesterday in the UK that kind of just talks about that even more. If you're a Bangladeshi female, you are again much more likely to be underemployed and not have access to these opportunities because you don't feel you belong or you just don't understand. So I think that intersectionality of lower socioeconomic status, your gender identity or your sexual orientation, whatever it may be, actually then amplifies it even more. And so through the 1 Hour project, we're trying to reach as many of those students that we can that fit in all of those sort of criteria of intersectionality so that we can help and support them. And what we were hoping for was, as again in the chat Manny's put in, is the bit we didn't quite appreciate, and I think, Manny, this is true, is we knew we would impact the students. What we didn't recognize was how much of an impact we'd have on the experts that have signed up their volunteering hours, because when they meet these students, they are truly blown away. But guess what? They would probably never get to see them in their recruitment processes of the organizations they work in, because we would have rejected them, or they would not even have had access to them. And that's the shift, you know, and I think that was the point about post-World War, you know, time to rebuild and rebuild better. How do we do good at scale? And that's what the 1 Hour project is about.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Manny, can you talk about some of those successes of the project on both sides, from the learners and the mentors?
Yeah, I think that Amani is a great example, and we have appreciated her as representing a wide variety of individuals who participated in this, and really, you know, giving voice to her experiences and how she's been impressed with the individuals that she's worked with. We obviously have a LinkedIn student group. And that gives us the opportunity to communicate directly with learners who are participating in the project. And we encourage you to visit that on LinkedIn, and you will hear directly, you will see comments that students have made about the impact that 1 hour has had for them. And they've really been poignant and very affirming. We've had students say, for example, I never imagined that I could have a conversation like this. And I mean, just think about that for a moment. You know, for the types of students we are trying to support, the idea of speaking to somebody who holds an important role in an organization is just beyond even their initial framework of their experience. So we've been really struck by that. We've been really struck by students who, give us feedback about these conversations and say, the individual I talked to was so genuinely interested in me. And that's something that really comes across, that addresses the affirmation piece, the confidence building piece. And we've worked very hard as a group to develop tools to help both the industry and subject matter experts who participate in the process, as well as the learners who participate. So we have instructional materials to help the students feel a little bit more confident, to think about the conversation, to prepare for it. And we do the same thing with our industry matter experts. And we see this whole area as continuing to evolve, where we could continue to strengthen students by providing them with the tools. And that's another part of Bob's research. It's not just the vouch, that someone can vouch for me, but that I'm given the tools I need to begin to think about this in a way that's impactful for me, in terms of the kinds of questions I want to ask, in terms of what I want to achieve through the process. So again, through our LinkedIn groups, I certainly encourage people that are interested in the 1 Hour project to learn more about that and to consider joining our LinkedIn communities and to hear directly from the participants on all those sides. One thing I do want to add is, the entire tech acquisition field is so technology driven. We rely on technology, and it's been enormously powerful. The ability to reach candidates wherever they are today is unprecedented. But for us, at the end of the day, that technology ultimately creates an opportunity for an individual to interact with another individual. And at the heart of it, that's the real power of the 1 Hour project, and something that really resonates with us in all the work that we do. How do we create that personal connection that really makes a difference for individuals on both sides.
It's fantastic, and never has there been a year when I think that individual connection can have a greater impact. So long may it continue. Talking of continuing, we would love to hear, you mentioned the opportunity to move into those other countries. We obviously have many people listening and listen back to the show who are in the US. When do you think you might be in the US? And if people want to get involved now, what can they do?
Can I just say something before Manny talks about the US, because I'm going to let Manny talk about the US. I think one of the things I didn't sort of answer in your last question around, employers and universities, what could they do? I think now is that time to reset, and this is why I think it segues really nicely into us talking about the launch in the US. Ask yourself the question, everything that's happened in the pandemic and absolutely the lessons that we have been sort of, I suppose, reawoken, because they were always there post George Floyd. What is it that we want to do? And when they look back at this period in time, and Lindsay's the expert in these snapshots, when they look back in this period in time, did we actually do anything decent? Did we pivot and actually try to do something better than what we had? If we go back and we think we're going to work with universities that we've always worked with, and that's all we're going to do, and we're going to put them through our processes, we're going to do the funnel, nothing will change. And so all these efforts that we're doing is going to be really important. And so university career services also need to, that piece about preparing students and preparing them for lifelong skills to be able to rethink how they navigate their career is going to be really, really important. So I guess my point is that only collectively as universities, as employers, as partners, can we work and solve this problem. It's not going to happen, and that's where the UN Sustainable Goals piece really comes in as well, and actually making sure that globally we do this. I think it's a really nice way for Manny then to talk about why the US and why other countries, because again, the pattern there you'll see is where there's professional associations that work in college labour markets, either guidance and preparation or employers, that's the obvious place to start.
Right. Yeah, picking up on that, I think it's clear to us that there's an enormous opportunity right now. The time is right. And so we have been working now for the past month, and will be in the coming months, to really lay the groundwork for entering the US, so to speak, with the 1 Hour Project. And that involves a number of different initiatives. One is, of course, there are a variety of legal processes that we have to go through to, establish a presence that will allow us to do the kinds of things that we want to accomplish with the 1 Hour Project. It involves kind of starting to sow the seeds with both the corporate, business, not-for-profit community, as well as the higher education community. So we fully expect that we will be able to roll out the 1 Hour Project in the US sometime in early fall, if all our planning comes together as we anticipate it will. What we are trying to do, and what we tried to do in the UK, was to be very thoughtful about running a pilot. And we piloted the initial effort with students both in the UK and in the US to get feedback about the process, the website, and so forth. We really tried to be kind of learner-centric in this process, and also learn what we could about working with potential industry matter experts. So consequently, our successes there are going to allow us to move more quickly in other parts of the world. We clearly see the US as next in line, and then the challenges are obviously are different in the US when it comes to the types of university and individual learner partnerships we want to form, and the extent of industry matter experts. So we're very excited about this next phase, if you will, of the 1 Hour Project. And even beyond that, while we're doing this in the US, we're looking closely at what can we do, perhaps even simultaneously, in Canada. And then what can we learn from North America and the UK and begin to apply to other parts of the world. As I mentioned, Ireland is very much on the map for us. A number of individuals actually have reached out to us who were Ireland based and said, when are you coming? We're fully prepared to support your efforts. And again, for a variety of reasons, touching on what Bob said, professional associations are a major pathway for us. Also with our colleagues in South Africa, where we really see a tremendous opportunity to support the efforts there of a really continuing to evolve economy. So each of these countries have different kinds of expectations and idiosyncratic dimensions that we need to really take into account as we move forward with this. But Lindsay, I really hope that we're going to be able to perhaps come back or at least give you an update in the fall about our efforts here in the US and our plans for other parts of the world.
Incredible. Thank you both. What amazing returning guests, and to hear a completely different initiative, even more worthwhile than the last time you spoke. So thank you so much for your contribution. The work of the 1 Hour Project, I think people are going to listen back to this and be desperate to get involved. And it's been wonderful to hear how much it's evolved. We are delighted at Capfinity to support you from a strengths perspective. We always now pass to our in-house narrator to give us a quick summary of what has been shared, and then I will let everyone know what is going to happen in episode 20. Thank you, Bob and Manny.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Bob Athwal. Thank you, Manny Contomanolis, for sharing with us about the 1 Hour Project. Nikki and I have talked a lot. One of our biggest fears about the pandemic is that we don't change anything. And I think the creation and the spread of the 1 Hour Project is going to ensure that that doesn't happen. 3 quick takeaways from our discussion. Number one, we need to acknowledge and support the fact that there is talent outside of the places that we traditionally look, and the intersectionality of that talent. And all 3 of you are first generation university students. So I think you are such a testament to that fact and how important it is that every organization realize that. Number 2, I love the concept of the vouch, how incredibly powerful it is for a student, particularly a young person, to have a subject matter expert acknowledge their strengths and what they have to bring to the world, and how empowering it can be for them to have that support. And third, I love your discussion of how much the subject matter experts get out of this, that yes, the goal is to support the first generation students to level the playing field, but the tremendous value and joy that brings to the mentors, the subject matter experts, is really powerful. So just thank you so much for the work that you do. And we can't wait to hear how this spreads around the world. Nikki.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we look forward to welcoming everyone back. There'll be a short break. We will be back on the 9th of July, and we will be welcoming HSBC, who are going to use the show to talk exclusively about their Future Skills program and how they are working with Lindsay and Capfinity to launch in the US using our V product, and hopefully reaching many of the students that you are reaching with the 1 Hour Project. So more to follow on social mobility on the 9th of July. But thank you, everybody. And we look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you, Bob and Manny.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Pleasure.